Every 10 years, there's a census, right? It's in the U.S. Constitution. There's a census, and after the census, they reapportion all of the districts reapportion all the districts in each state, right? The congressional districts, the U.S. Senate districts, and then also the state House and state Senate districts, right? And so we've just had a census, which means that we're doing redistricting, right? And next year, the legislature will have to vote on a map, a redistricted map based on the movement of population. If you want me to like get down into like numbers down to the hundreds, you're in trouble. I'd have to guide, but I can point you at the website. But basically, what has happened is that Johnson County and Wyandotte County have gotten bigger, and rural Kansas has gotten smaller. And so there's going to be some redistricting. The 3rd district, where Sharice Davids is the congresswoman, her district's now too big. 3rd district is now too big in terms of number of people. So some of that is going to have to go to another district. This is going to be a big fight, of course, because everybody knows how this precinct votes and how that precinct votes and what's a blue county and what's a red county, and so it's going to be a fight. What I wanted to do today is just explain to you how the process works, and I'll keep you updated as the process develops throughout the year. So first, I got to do a history lesson because I'm an historian. I got to do a history lesson, but I think it's germane to what we're talking about today. 10 years ago, we redistricted, and there was a much less conservative Republican caucus in the Senate than there is today. There were 3 parties. There were Democrats, Republicans, and moderate Republicans. And so they could not decide on a map. They drew and drew and drew and committed and committed and committed and had hearing after hearing after hearing, and they could not decide. They could not get a big enough majority for the map. And so the map ended up going to the Supreme Court, because there's basically in our Constitution there's a stepwise process where the legislature draws a map, the governor vetoes or doesn't veto, they redraw the map, and then eventually, if they can't decide, it goes to the courts. The Supreme Court drew our maps. This district was drawn by the Supreme Court, not by the legislature. Now, I just told you one of my deep-held beliefs is that elected officials should make decisions that affect your lives, not unelected people. Those judges are not elected; they're appointed. They don't even get confirmed by the Senate. The Bar Association picks them, or some lawyers from the Bar Association picks them, and then the governor picks one of 3, and boom, they're a Supreme Court justice. So those aren't elected people, right? They're not even confirmed by elected people. So I am committed to trying to get these maps voted on by the legislature and agreed to by the governor. And that means one of 2 things. We either got to come up with a supermajority, 2/3 to override any veto, or we got to compromise with the governor and do something in between. That's not what happened last time, and that's why the courts ended up drawing it. And I think that's a disaster for Kansas. I mean, this district, there's a couple principles when you're drawing a district, right? One of the big ones is this idea of communities of interest. It means that like people that have, there's a bunch of different criteria, but it's like culture, language. I mean, there's all these different things that basically say these people are basically alike, so they should all be in the same district. You shouldn't like divide them up across 2 districts, right? And my Leavenworth, the west side of Leavenworth, you've got a lot of retired and active duty military. You've got a lot of retired and active corrections officers, both for the USP and for the Lansing Correctional Facility. And then you've got the actual USP and you've got Fort Leavenworth up there at the top. And then the eastern half of the district is a lot, it's more economically disadvantaged. There's a lot fewer retirees. It skews a lot younger than the western side of Leavenworth. So what you would think would happen is that if you're trying to keep communities of interest together, what you would think would happen is that they just draw a line down 4th Street and they would put everybody on this side of 4th Street in one district and they put everybody on that side of 4th Street in another district. And I would contend that the people who live on Fort Leavenworth, who I represent as well, they're probably more like Western Leavenworth because there's a lot of active duty military and retirees that live in western side of Leavenworth. And if you've walked, I've seen some city commission and some school board candidates in there. If you've walked and knocked this town, it is. It's like when you cross that street, it's like a different city on the west side of 4th Street. And so you would think that's what they would do. But what they ended up doing is exactly what you're not supposed to do, what the Constitution says that you're not supposed to do, and what Supreme Court ruling after ruling says you're not supposed to do. They ended up dividing this district by party. This is a compromised district. 41st District, the district that I represent, is a compromised district. It is 1/3 Republican, 1/3 Democrat, and 1/3 unaffiliated. It's a competitive district. It was part of a compromise between the Democrats and the Republicans with the Supreme Court to draw several competitive districts so that the Democrats could win one once in a while, right? And so they cut 2 communities of interest in half in order to make a compromised district. Some other interesting things about this district, because I've got a lot of folks from this district in the room. Another couple of interesting things about this district is we've got the prison in this district, and none of the prisoners vote, right? Because until you go through the process to get your voting rights back, you don't vote. It's like 1,800 people, 1,800 people, depending on the day. And then you've got Fort Leavenworth. And a lot of the people in Fort Leavenworth are not registered to vote in the state of Kansas, mostly because our property taxes are so darn high. They all stay registered in Texas, where there's no property tax. And so there are very few actual Kansas voters living up on Fort Leavenworth. I think in the last election, like 200 or 300 people voted on Fort Leavenworth, but there's like thousands of people up there, right? So you probably didn't notice, sorry, I'm going way too long. You probably didn't notice when you were voting in municipal elections 2 years ago, if you voted in municipal elections 2 years ago, but the back side of that ballot had a constitutional amendment on it that said that we are going to count everybody on military bases and at universities where they're at, not where they're from. Because the Kansas Constitution used to say the census would happen, and then the Secretary of State had to call everybody on Fort Leavenworth and say, hey, are you registered in the state of Kansas, or do you pay taxes in the state of Kansas? Are you a Kansas resident? And if not, they got struck from the numbers before we drew the state House districts and Senate districts. They counted for the U.S. Congress and the Senate districts, but then they got sliced off for the state House. And we all voted, or it happened and you didn't vote, we all voted to do away with that. So now those people all count in our district, right? They always counted. I didn't mean it like that. They always counted. What? Will they be able to vote? If they're registered in the state of Kansas, they can vote. It doesn't do anything with their voting rights. They're still either registered here or not registered here. They're either residents or they're not residents. But they do count for this House district. And the House districts, the state House districts, the number's around 27,000. I said don't quote me on hundreds, okay? But about 27,000 people in each House district times 125 equals all the people in Kansas, right? So if you've got 8,000 people up on Fort Leavenworth, that's a big, huge number all of a sudden, right? So that's going to affect this House district too. And then, in the Senate, you've got, it's around 70-ish, don't quote me on the number, but it's around 70-ish thousand people in a Senate district. And our Senate district right now was another one of those compromised districts. So we've got half, or a third, or somewhere between a third and a half of Leavenworth County, and then we got a bunch of Wyandotte County, and it's all smushed together so that it equals about 1/3 Democrats, 1/3 Republicans, 1/3 Independents. And so it was another compromised district. And so if we're going to follow the Constitution of the United States and all of the case law on redistricting, so that our map doesn't end up in the Kansas Supreme Court with the Kansas Supreme Court drawing the lines, then we've got to make our maps look like the community's interest and not split the communities of interest. And so what does all that mean? I have no idea, because we haven't drawn any maps yet, right? I'm not on the committee that does redistricting, but they haven't even drawn any maps yet. Okay, they're not going to start until January. So your next question, why are you telling me this, Pat? Because if you don't know anything about what's going to look like, who cares? You've got a chance right now to make your voice heard on what you think the map should look like. What do you think a community of interest is? What do you think? I live on the west side of 4th Street, and as you go west, it just gets more and more corrections officers, retired corrections officers, and retired military and active duty military. And when you go south from my house, it just keeps on the other side of the downtown where not many people live, it's the same way. And then when I go walk on the east side of 4th Street, it's like a different city. You've got the homeless shelter over there, you've got the planners too, with low income housing. It's just demographically different. It's a lot younger, and it's a lot different economically. So let's draw the districts that way. And so that's what I'm going to be fighting for. But you get a say. I'm going to, through my email list, if you haven't already signed up, put your name on the list and put your email, and I'll add you to my email list. I'm going to tell you how you can communicate with the committee that's doing redistricting, so your voice can be reflected when they're drawing those maps. And I go up there and I represent you, and it's a lot easier to represent you when I can show the committee. If you look in the testimony, you'll find 20, 30, 40 letters from my constituents all saying what I'm telling you, which is that our district's all jacked up. So I'll be more artful than that, I promise. I've got until January to think of what I'm going to say. But that's how you can help. Yeah, that's how you can help. And so if you're not already on my mailing list, I'll put your name down there, put your email down there, and I'll get you on the mailing list.